Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Today, India's stocks hit the headlines because they nosedived after weeks of rallies, which begs the question, what caused the crash? And if you're an investor in India, should you be worried? We'll discuss all of that. Meanwhile, the government is focusing on tech for the next decade, calling it the Techade. We'll tell you why this is critical and the right strategic call. Also, what are the challenges ahead? Speaking of which, Vladimir Putin is threatening a nuclear war. He has issued a new message for Joe Biden. In Pakistan, the president, infamous for corruption, the Mr. 10%, is pulling off a political stunt by saying he'll not take his salary. In the UK, the government is targeting foreign students. We'll tell you how. In Africa, the threat of new colonizers, loan sharks like China and Western firms plundering resources. In Japan, a rocket crashes seconds after takeoff. A special report on the threat that deepfakes pose, featuring a deepfake video of this show, Vantage. And exploring the world beneath, why humans know so little about the deep sea and how we still manage to exploit it. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Joe Biden and Donald Trump set for an election rematch. The US president and his predecessor secured their parties as nominations. The presidential polls will be held in November. Opinion polls suggest it will be a tight contest. This will be the first rematch in a presidential election in 70 years. Election season in India as well. Will there be assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir along with the parliamentary polls? The Election Commission is mulling the move. Since 2018, the Union Territory has been without an elected government. Alexei Navalny's ally attacked in Lithuania. Leonid Volov was struck with a hammer outside his home in Vilnius. Lithuania claims the attack was organized by Russia. It comes almost a month after Navalny died in an Arctic prison. Volov has blamed Russian President Vladimir Putin for it. Another Chinese property giant in big trouble. Beijing scrambles to bail out China Vanke after Moody's downgraded its credit rating to junk. China's property crisis has already claimed two major developers, Evergrande and Country Garden. In Rwanda, a court upholds the election ban on opposition leader Victoire Ingabire. She won't be able to contest in the July presidential election. Ingabire is a fierce critic of President Paul Kagame. He is widely expected to win a fourth term in office. And the European Parliament gives its final approval to a landmark law on artificial intelligence. It is the world's first major act to regulate AI and models like ChatGPT. The rules will come into force from May, but implementation will begin from 2025. We begin tonight with the Indian markets. Is the bull run over? I ask because today Indian stocks took a dive. Everything was in the red. India's leading stock exchanges are the Nifty and the Sensex. Both saw a fall. The Nifty was down by about 300 points, more than 300 points. The Sensex dropped by almost 1,000 points. Leading names in the banking sector, telecom, oil and gas, even metal stocks fell. In one word, it was a bloodbath. And this is quite a contrast from the recent spikes. A few weeks ago, Indian stocks were being celebrated. Indian markets had become the fourth biggest in the world, overtaking Hong Kong. There was a clear upswing. Hence the question, has that momentum come to a grinding halt today? And the short answer is no. If you're investing for the long term, there is no need for you to worry. India's numbers are healthy. The government is looking at an 8% growth for the current financial year, that's 2023-24. The IMF is optimistic, that's the International Monetary Fund. They say India will, quote unquote, easily remain the world's fastest growing economy. So the growth trajectory is positive, but in the short term, the markets may see some turbulence. Which brings us back to the question, what caused today's slide, in fact? Most likely, market events like this one. Some big-ticket foreign investors have reduced their holdings in their Indian businesses. This includes the likes of Whirlpool Corporation. Now, Whirlpool, as you would know, is an electronics giant. It has sold a part of its India business. Same with Singapore Telecommunications Limited. It's a major telecom player, better known as Singtel. Since the year 2000, it has been a strategic investor in Airtel, one of the biggest telecom companies in India. Now, Singtel has sold some of its shares. 0.8% of its Airtel stock. That's what it has sold. In total, there have been at least 7 such instances in recent weeks, cases where a major player has divested a part of its India operations or is planning to do so. And why are they selling these shares? It's a strategic move. Market experts call it a strategic sale. You see, when the value of your business is at its peak, when your share price zooms up, you offload some shares and make money. That's a strategic sale. Businesses usually take this route when they're looking to raise quick money or when they want to cash in on the momentum. Both Whirlpool and Singtel need cash. Whirlpool wants to reduce its debt. Singtel wants more money to invest in data centers, so they went ahead with a strategic sale, and these businesses could not have timed it better. Since November last year, Indian markets have been on fire. Stock prices have shot through the roof. They're among the most expensive in the world now. For the last 8 years, Indian markets have gained continuously, so you could say this fall was coming for investors to make some money and to book profits. And that's what has happened today. But that's not the only reason for today's fall. India's small and mid-cap stocks saw a massive drop today. It was their worst day of trading in more than 2 years. Now, what are small and mid-cap stocks? These are small and medium-sized companies. Small and medium-sized by market value. They're listed on the stock exchanges. Small-cap companies are worth less than 5,000 crores. That's around $600 million. And mid-cap companies are worth between 5 and 20,000 crores. So that's around $600 million to $2.4 billion. And why do people invest in these stocks? For big returns. Because compared to large companies, small and medium-sized businesses can grow faster, potentially. They have room for exponential growth. So they can deliver substantial returns, which is why investors are eager to buy these stocks. They're looking for what is commonly called the next multi-bagger, a company or a group of companies that can deliver massive returns. At the same time, they can see a steep crash too. They can also fall substantially. It's the risk you take. Now, India's market regulator has been worried about this risk. It's called SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI. SEBI thinks that there are signs of a bubble in these stocks. The SEBI chief gave a statement this week, and here is what she said, I'm quoting, "There are pockets of froth in the market. Some call it a bubble. It may not be appropriate to allow that bubble to keep building because when it bursts, it adversely impacts investors." Now, this statement came with some advice, and this advice was aimed at mutual funds in particular. The SEBI chief wants mutual funds to manage their risks better, their risk with small and mid-cap investments. The SEBI chief says this risk should be managed better, and the statement was almost like a directive, asking mutual funds to conduct what is called a stress test. They must do this stress test once every 15 days and disclose the results. Now, what is a stress test? It's like an internal assessment. It is designed to test whether a mutual fund in its current form can withstand sudden shocks. What kind of shocks? Like a large request from an investor for the withdrawal of their investment. If someone asks to pull out that money, can the mutual fund withstand that shock? They should be able to handle this pressure. And they should test this. Now, reports say mutual funds followed the SEBI orders, and that may have led to a churn in their portfolios. This is what has been happening. Now, if you put all of this together, if you connect all these dots, the big picture emerges. And it looks like this. No major cause of concern. Market fluctuations do not impact India's growth story. Plus, there's a large influx of investors in the Indian market. So there's a good reason for Indian regulators to step up vigilance, to introduce measures to shield the small investors from sudden shocks. That's what is happening. Every decade is defined by something, maybe a technology or a resource or a political movement. For this decade, that something is chips. Tiny but powerful semiconductors. They're part of everything that we use. Cars, weapons, gadgets, you name it, and there's a chip inside. So every country is trying to gain a foothold in this industry, the chip industry. Every country, including India. Today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in a special event. It's called India's Techade. Now, don't go Googling what a Techade is. It's basically a combination of tech and decade. Techade. India wants to use chips to power its economic growth, to become a key player in this industry. Today's event marked a big step in that journey. The Prime Minister laid the foundation stone for 3 chip projects. The first one is in Gujarat, a chip fabrication plant set up by the Tata Group. Total investments around $10 billion. This will be India's first chip fabrication plant. The second project is in Assam. Again, it is being set up by the Tata Group. Total investments around $3.2 billion. This facility will assemble chips. And finally, the third project, located in the city of Sanand in Gujarat. It's being set up by CG Power and Industrial Solutions. Total investment around $1 billion. So that's 3 chip projects. Put together, they're worth some $15 billion. But the government is just getting started here. Prime Minister Modi says India will soon become a chip power.
भारत पहले ही एक स्पेस, न्यूक्लियर और डिजिटल पावर है। आने वाले समय में हम सेमीकंडक्टर सेक्टर से जुड़े प्रोडक्ट्स का कॉमर्शियल प्रोडक्शन करेंगे। वो दिन दूर नहीं जब भारत इसमें भी एक ग्लोबल पावर बनेगा।
It's not just a vision, it's a strategic necessity. Because chips are the building blocks of modern life, so you cannot depend on others for them. If you do, you will be at their mercy. And we've seen this happen before. Just consider the social media revolution of the last decades. American firms dominated that period, and Indian firms nowhere in the picture. India had no answer to WhatsApp or Instagram or Twitter. India still doesn't have an answer, and look at the result. These companies sidestep Indian regulation. They do little to fight fake news, yet they milk the Indian market. Some Asian challengers did emerge, the biggest being TikTok. TikTok was created by a company based in China. TikTok managed to challenge and beat American tech firms, American social media platforms. But look at it now. The US is on the verge of banning TikTok. India has already banned it, and other Western countries have partially banned it. Now, TikTok is not exactly innocent here, but you get the drift. The US and its social media firms have fiercely guarded this industry. They won't let others succeed, which is why sovereign platforms are so important. A strong, homegrown industry. That's what the Indian government is now aiming for. Prime Minister Modi also hinted at this. He said India missed the bus during the previous industrial revolutions and a repeat must be avoided.
पहली, दूसरी और तीसरी औद्योगिक क्रांति के समय भारत अनेक कारणों से पीछे रह गया था। लेकिन अब भारत इंडस्ट्री 4.0 चौथी औद्योगिक क्रांति के नेतृत्व के इरादे से आत्मविश्वास के साथ आगे बढ़ रहा है। हम एक पल भी गंवाना नहीं चाहते।
How feasible is this dream, though? As always, there are challenges and advantages. Let's look at the advantages first. India doesn't have geopolitical stigma. We are not China. Western powers see China as a revisionist country, as a strategic rival. But they see India as a partner. So Western powers are helping New Delhi create new supply chains. One such deal was signed last year, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. India, the US and 12 others agreed to diversify supply chains. And that's a big advantage. The second advantage is skilled labor. 68% of India's population is in the working age. That's around 900 million people. And to make more chips, you need more workers. Of course, you have to skill them and train them. Now we come to the challenges. The chip industry can be divided into three parts: designing, manufacturing, and assembling. If you want the big money, you must design. That's the most skillful part of this industry, also the most lucrative, designing a chip. But most of the chip designing is done in the United States by companies like Intel and Nvidia. They're now worth billions of dollars. Manufacturing a chip brings in less money, and assembling it, even less. Now, I'm not saying that these are not important, manufacturing and assembling. But if you want to be self-reliant, you need all three. As of now, India isn't there. We are mostly focusing on manufacturing and assembling. But as they say, you have to start somewhere. You can't become a chip superpower overnight. It will take time and investments. We're talking about a structural change here. You must convince students to learn about chips. You must convince companies to invest in them. You must convince state governments to give incentives, and you must convince foreign companies and players to come to India. It's going to be a long process. The good news is the government is thinking in the right direction. Just consider today's event, the Indian Tech Age Show. It had thousands of students attending virtually. They logged in from different cities and colleges. The key is to sustain this. And at the same time, keep an eye on the horizon, because technology will not end with chips. There will be more advanced products and industries coming up. We need to identify and invest in them. If not, we will be stuck in catch-up mode. Now let's talk about Vladimir Putin. He seems to be in a bad mood. He's saber-rattling again, threatening a nuclear war. Listen to this.
How can you be ready for it? Are we really ready for nuclear war?
From the technical point of view, of course, we are ready.
We are technically ready. Now, Putin may be phrasing it differently, but there's no doubt as to what he's talking about. He's talking about nuclear weapons, and the threat is aimed at his adversaries, the West, led by the United States. And he said all of this in an interview. The Russian president laid out some ground rules for his American counterpart, Joe Biden.
The United States announced not sending troops to Ukraine. They are interventionists. That is how we will treat it, even if they appear on Ukrainian territory. They understand that. I told you that Biden is a representative of the traditional school of politics. That shows.
Now, that's a message for the US president. Putin is basically saying Ukraine is Russian territory. If American troops enter Ukraine, Moscow will have reason to escalate the fight. And that could mean deploying nuclear weapons, if that's what it comes down to. And here's something else that we must point out. Putin has done this before. He has issued nuclear threats in the past too, especially after his forces invaded Ukraine. But in this instance, his tone was more firm.
Why do we need to use weapons of mass destruction? There has never been such a need.
So this thought never occurred to you?
No, what for? Well, weapons exist to be used.
Weapons exist to be used. That's what Putin said about his nuclear arsenal. And with this statement, he's shifting the onus on the West to de-escalate and to pull both parties away from the brink of a nuclear conflict. He also said that he's ready for a serious dialogue on Ukraine, but he has two preconditions. One, Russia will hold on to its territorial gains, and two, the West should give security guarantees. What does that mean? What are security guarantees? Putin did not spell it out, but most likely he's asking for a ban on Western deployments in Ukraine and a curb on NATO's activities in the region. Now, where does the West stand on these demands? For Joe Biden, they're a non-starter. In his State of the Union address, Biden declared that he won't bend before Russia.
Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, do whatever the hell you want. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable.
Biden is seeking a re-election this year. Any concessions to Russia would be political suicide. He won't do it. The only option is to keep backing Ukraine, and Joe Biden is going to extreme lengths to do it. He wanted to give an aid package to Ukraine, a package worth $60 billion, but it remains stuck in the US Congress. So Biden is looking for alternatives. Yesterday, he announced a new weapons package for Ukraine. This one is worth $300 million. This is what Washington will give Kiev, weapons worth $300 million, and it will leave America vulnerable. The US will be left with no money to replenish its own stocks, its own weapon stock. And this will put America's war readiness at risk. But President Biden remains firm. He's giving more weapons to Ukraine because he wants to be seen as doing something. He wants to be seen as still helping in the fight against Russia. And $300 million is a good amount. Ukraine could use every penny of it. But it won't be enough to turn the tide in their favor, or for that matter, to reassure American allies. Take Poland, for example. Their president is visiting the US, and this is what he said.
Believe in America. We believe that Poland and Europe need more America, militarily, politically, and economically. More American spirit in thinking and acting.
President Duda is not the only one asking America to do more. European allies are jittery. In Slovakia, there are protests. Thousands of people took to the streets to show their support for Ukraine and to criticize their own prime minister. His name is Robert Fico. He's seen as anti-Ukraine. He opposes military aid to Kiev. He says Ukraine should give up the land in Russian control and end the war. So basically, the Western camp is divided, and Putin is turning on the heat with threats of a nuclear war. Let's turn to Pakistan now. Their new president has made an announcement. That's Asif Ali Zardari. As president, he is entitled to a government salary. That's around $300,000 per month. That should be his salary. But Zardari says he won't take it. Why? Because Pakistan's economy is going through a tough time and Zardari does not want to burden the treasury. So noble, right? A selfless act by a dedicated leader. Well, think again. Zardari is one of the richest men in Pakistan. He's worth around $1.8 billion, and a lot of that wealth has come from corruption. He was quite an expert at swindling money. So good that he had a nickname, Mr. 10%. That was the cut for getting things done. So Zardari giving up his salary is not selfless or noble. It reeks of political showmanship, like putting an entire house on fire and then turning up with a mug of water. I hope Pakistan's people don't buy it. But let's take a closer look at Zardari's story. He was born into a Sindhi family of landlords. His lifestyle became the talk of the town. There was a lot of partying, a lot of fights, a lot of romantic flings, and a lot of polo. Many called him a playboy who plays polo. His life took a major turn in 1987. That's when he married Benazir Bhutto. Now, Bhutto was Pakistan's leader in waiting. She led the Pakistan People's Party. And as she claimed power, Zardari entered politics, first as Environment Minister in 1993 and then as Investment Minister until 1996. And during this time, Zardari was neck deep in corruption. His rivals called him Mr. 10% because he would take 10% kickbacks from government contracts. Hence the nickname. Even foreign governments investigated his corruption, like Switzerland and Britain. At home, he was put in jail for 11 years. And if you know Pakistan politics, you know that that's a long time. 11 years is a long time because usually politicians wiggle out of jail, but not Asif Ali Zardari. His crimes range from corruption to extortion and murder. Now that same man is the president of Pakistan. So there's nothing to celebrate about Zardari's latest decision. Forget giving up his salary. He should be paying ordinary Pakistanis for putting up with him. But PR stunts aside, how is Pakistan's economy doing? Pretty badly. A team from the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, arrived today. Their job is to review Pakistan's bailout. It was agreed last year. The IMF is supposed to disburse $3 billion to Pakistan. 2 payments have been made. The final one is awaited. If the IMF team is happy, the rest of the money will be released to Pakistan. And they're in the country, in Pakistan, until next Monday. They will hold talks with the new finance minister. His name is Mohammad Aurangzeb. Now, this appointment is very important because Mohammad Aurangzeb is a political outsider. He's a career banker, studied at the Wharton School of Business, worked in international banks like Citi and JP Morgan, headed Pakistan's biggest commercial bank, HBL, and now appointed as the country's finance minister. It's a big change for the Sharifs too. Traditionally, they have trusted Ishak Dar with the finance ministry. But this time, he's been shifted out. So Islamabad is sending a message to the IMF and the international community that they're serious about turning the economy around. The question is, will the IMF buy it? Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has already called for another IMF loan. He has not mentioned a number yet, but reports say he wants another $6 billion. The finance minister will present Pakistan's case to the IMF team. He's called for a large and long-term program. So it's now up to the IMF. Do they trust the new government's intentions? Do they believe Asif Ali Zardari's fiscal prudence? Or do they trust the technocrat finance minister at their own peril? This is a country where elected prime ministers do not have real power. So how powerful can a non-political finance minister be? It's something that the IMF should think about. The UK government has a new enemy. It's foreign students. Last year, the government imposed a series of restrictions on them. Visa fees were hiked. Work visas were reduced. Family members were not allowed. And now the Home Secretary has made a new claim. His name is James Cleverly. He's like their Home Minister. And he says that foreign students are undermining the UK's higher education. How? By using university courses as a cheap way to get work visas. So he wants an investigation. But does his claim hold water? Because foreign students help the British economy. Since 2019, they've added $76 billion to the economy. So why is the UK fighting them? Our next report tells you.
This is James Cleverly. He's the UK Home Secretary. And he has a new problem. Foreign students. Cleverly thinks they are undermining the UK's higher education system. He thinks they are using cheap courses as a way to get a work visa. The UK has something called the graduate route visa. Basically, after you complete your course, you don't have to immediately leave the country. You can stay back, work for 2 to 3 years, and get a work visa during the period. Of course, it's not for all graduates or all courses. But Cleverly has a problem with this. He says the plan is flawed. It's not attracting the brightest or the best. He thinks students are abusing it. So the Home Secretary has ordered a probe. It will look at any evidence of abuse. It will find out if students are misusing the graduate route visa. The Home Secretary's comments have left many universities concerned. They say Cleverly's remarks are alarming. The UK graduate route is a key component of higher education in the UK. It makes education in the country more attractive. So universities believe these comments will only turn away prospective students. And it already is. Since last year, the UK has waged a battle against foreign students. It has hiked visa fees. It has cut work entitlement. What's that? It allows foreign students to work in the UK. The UK has also barred international students from bringing family members over. And now, even the post-work visa is in danger. All these steps have spooked international students. They are avoiding the UK, and it's showing in the numbers. This year, international student numbers in the UK have fallen by a third. Enrollment in postgraduate courses is down by 40%. Applications from non-EU countries have seen a sharp decrease. Take Nigeria, for example. Applications have dropped by 46% this year. Indian students too are turning away. But it's not as drastic. There's a 4% drop in applications. Cleverly may think it's a good deterrent, but it's harming the UK's economy. Just look at the numbers. The UK has over 320,000 international students. Every year, they pay a fee of $21,000. Since 2019, foreign students have boosted the UK's economy by $76 billion. Plus, foreign students make education cheaper for locals. They help subsidize the cost. So the sudden drop in numbers will affect not just universities, but also domestic students. And it doesn't stop there. The economy of these university towns will be hit, and so will the overall economy. Universities are already taking measures to counter the government's policies. They are reportedly lowering their entry standards. Plus, they are using recruitment agents. But it isn't working. Foreign students remain doubtful and they are dumping the UK for other countries. The UK may say it wants to strike a balance. It aims to tackle migration but also attract the brightest talent. It's a tightrope walk, and the balance cannot be found by waging a battle on international students.
When I say colonization, what is it that comes to your mind? Considering our last story, you'd say the UK and you'd be spot on. The British were among the biggest colonizers that our world has seen. But right now, I'm talking about the concept, colonization. What does it really mean? One can argue that it is the draining of resources by a foreign power, a faraway nation taking away your wealth, making themselves richer, leaving your land barren and your people impoverished. Now, this kind of colonization has not really gone away. It is still rampant, especially in the continent of Africa. Only the colonizers have changed. Now it's China. And it's not sending its armies to Africa. China is using another tactic. It's called resource-backed loans. Loans in return for African resources. And whichever way you look at it, Africa stands to lose. Let me explain how. China has been pouring money into Africa for decades in the name of bringing development. But this is not charity, it's debt. China, in fact, has given money to at least 11 African nations. And we're talking about billions of dollars here in the form of investments and loans. What does China get in return? African resources. Suppose a country needs an emergency loan. They go to a lender, someone who's willing to give them money and to give it fast. Also someone who doesn't complain or lecture about corruption or worry about the sustainability of the debt. This lender just wants to make money by exploiting the desperate nation. It's the classic definition of a loan shark, aka China. In Africa and elsewhere too, China is the biggest loan shark. It offers loans to African countries and the loans come with brutal riders. Money is disbursed in exchange for natural resources. Whatever natural wealth the country possesses, oil, gas, copper, cobalt, you name it, everything is up for grabs. And this is not a fair exchange, far from it.
First and foremost, because you can't price the asset properly. If you have minerals, oil, metals, and gas under the ground, it's not actually being marketed. So how you actually come up with a price of that for a long-term contract, it's a challenge.
Undervaluing natural assets is standard. China sizes up the commodity, declares a low estimate of it, and then demands that as compensation. Think of it as a pawn shop, which is ripping you off. But the borrowing nation has no choice really. The lender has agreed to give them money, and that too urgently. They also promise to invest in your country, build infrastructure to extract your resources, and they promise to give a tiny share of this wealth to you. How does a desperate government argue?
Is that the negotiation is very asymmetric. Most countries that want to do natural resource-backed loans are probably dealing with bigger countries, bigger commercial banks that want to give them a loan and say, well, look, it's urgent, we need it, but this is what you have to sign. But it is those that actually want to give the loan that have the upper power, not the person who wants or the country that wants to receive the loan.
If outright bullying does not work, there's always corruption. Look at these reports. China is mentioned everywhere. It is accused of buying off officials in multiple countries, which is cheaper than paying the correct price for natural resources. Just offer a bribe. And on the rare occasion that China is called out, you'll hear about settlements, confidential new deals. But these additional Chinese payments never seem to reach the common people. And China seems to have perfected the art of exploiting Africa, but it's not the only one doing it. Western companies are in on this. Take the Swiss traders, Glencore and Trafigura. They've also been called out over the same resource-backed loans. They gave loans to countries like Chad, the Republic of Congo, and Angola. Chad in particular was crushed by Glencore's loan. The loan was in return for oil. Chad made money by selling oil, but most of this money went straight to the Swiss company, while Chad kept becoming poorer until it became the first nation to ask for a debt overhaul from the G20. So the West is definitely complicit. They just mask their neo-colonization better. So the question is, which is worse, China or the Western firms? We'd say China, because in the case of Western companies, at least there are courts, international courts, some semblance of legal recourse for the victims. But if it's a Chinese loan, we wish you good luck. Because China doesn't seem to believe in international courts, it doesn't even listen to them. So African nations must be on their guard. They've been colonized before, most of them. They won their independence. And now it seems they'll have to fight for it again. And now on to Japan. It was an important day for the country. A Kairos rocket was launching today. But just 5 seconds after the takeoff, the rocket exploded. It burst into flames. The Kairos rocket was made by Space One. It's a private space company. The launch was to test Japan's private space sector, but the explosion has spooked observers. Because while failures are commonplace for space agencies, private space companies have taken it to a new level. The question is, why can't they get it right? And what risks do these explosions pose? Here's our report.
Kairos. In Greek, it means the right moment. That's what the Space One rocket was waiting for. The 18-meter Kairos rocket was all prepared. It was geared for takeoff. The launch took place in western Japan. Hundreds of spectators gathered. They all had high hopes for it. If it had succeeded, Space One would have been the first private company to put a rocket into orbit.
We have ignition and liftoff of Kairos.
Just 5 seconds after takeoff, it exploded. The rocket burst into flames, leaving behind a large cloud of smoke. Space One scrambled into action. The fire was soon put out. No one was hurt. But how did the rocket burst within just seconds? That's something Space One will have to investigate.
Approximately 5 seconds after liftoff, measures were taken to suspend the flight. A task force has been set up and the cause is under investigation.
Space One is a private company. It was established in 2018 by a team of Japanese tech businesses. Since then, it has chased space glory. The plan was to put the satellite into orbit. It was supposed to happen 51 minutes after takeoff. But the rocket didn't even last 5 seconds. The cause for the explosion is not known yet. But it is not the first hurdle for Space One. It has faced part shortages, it has battled technical issues, and all of this delayed the Kairos launch. But even after takeoff, the problems didn't end for the company. They will now probe this launch and course correct. Crashes are not new for private space companies. They may have joined the space race, but they don't often get it right on the first try, or even the second. Case in point, SpaceX. Its Starship has crashed not just once, but twice. But it hasn't bothered Elon Musk. He says crashes are important. It helps the company understand the problems. So for private space companies, they have become commonplace. But not everyone has that luxury. Take national space agencies, for example. They run on public funding, so they cannot go about crashing rockets for the sake of research. 1 or 2 attempts are expected and normal. But SpaceX believes it could have at least a dozen crashes before it gets it right. For that, you need very deep pockets. Because imagine the money that'll be spent. Even when cash is not a constraint, there are risks of space debris. In 2022, a huge piece of space junk smashed into a sheep farm. That was in Southeast Australia. A hunk of metal was linked to a SpaceX Crew 1 mission. SpaceX has not confirmed it, but it raises concerns. Of course, chances of humans being killed by space debris are low, but it can happen. Which brings us to the space race. It's getting crowded. Over 100 orbital launches are performed every year. The number will only rise in the coming years. Private companies are behind a lot of these launches. They are testing rockets, they are crashing them. And that means space is becoming crowded with junk parts, which means the risk of death and injury will grow. They say try and try again until you succeed. But how many rockets do you destroy before you give up?
We've reported a lot on deepfakes. When celebrities got deepfaked, we covered it. When politicians got deepfaked, we covered it. But this time, it's closer home. We found a deepfake of this show. That's right, a fake Vantage. It's got a doctored version of me and my voice. Take a look at this first. Best news for all the people of India. The 29-year-old bride of Anant Ambani, the youngest son of the richest man in India, during the biggest celebration, which was attended by many world stars, told journalists that she is launching her investment project for everyone in India, in which absolutely everyone will be able to multiply their investments in just 3 hours. Especially for everyone in India, our editorial team found Sona's contact. Go to the Telegram channel. The link will be in the description. Let me emphasize again, that's a deepfake video you just saw. If you come across it, please flag it. And do not share it anywhere else. With that said, let's take a closer look at this video. Like most deepfakes, you can spot the differences. For starters, the content. We do not promote shady investment platforms. So that's a red flag right there. Same with things like accent and format. If you notice carefully, these things are obvious. But the fact is, you shouldn't have to. There should be guardrails in place, rules that stop the creation of unsolicited deepfakes, or at least their publication on the internet. We found this one on Facebook. Thankfully, it had not generated much buzz. But that may not always be the case, because deepfakes are getting better and better. One day, we may not be able to spot the differences between what's fake and what's real. What happens then? Who takes responsibility for the damages? And this conversation is very important in 2024. We are seeing the collision of two very important factors this year. One is artificial intelligence. You can make deepfakes easily with AI, and the other is elections. Around half the world is voting this year. Countries like India and the US will be electing new governments. What happens if you combine these two, AI, deepfakes, and elections? It's a complete unknown. We do not know what a deepfake election will look like, but we do know that we are not ready for it. Let's look at some numbers. In 2023, around 500,000 deepfakes were shared on social media. 500,000. And those are the reported ones. Many more would have gone unnoticed or unreported. Video deepfakes rose 3 times in 2023. Audio deepfakes increased 8 times. So AI has turbocharged the deepfake menace. But do we have a solution for it? Ideally, government regulation would be the answer, but there isn't any. Not just here in India, but anywhere in the world. In December, India's IT ministry sent an advisory to social media companies. It asked them to crack down on deepfakes. But nothing has changed. You see, social media companies have safe harbor protection. Suppose you find a deepfake on Instagram, a hateful or triggering deepfake. You can sue the person behind the deepfake, but you cannot sue Instagram because as a platform, they have safe harbor. They're not fully liable for the content they host. But now there is talk of diluting it. And there's a reason why. If social media companies are liable, they will be more alert. They will filter deepfakes themselves. If not, they could get sued. Which brings us to the technical side of things. How can you identify deepfakes? Looking for clues is not a reliable method. It will take a lot of time and effort. You need technology to cut that down. Some softwares do exist. Intel, for instance, has a product that can detect deepfake content. It's called Fake Catcher. The company claims it is 96% accurate. Some camera makers are also on the job, like Sony and Nikon. Their plan is to assign a digital signature to real photos, sort of like a birthmark. If a picture has that mark, it's real. If not, it could be a deepfake. But none of these solutions are perfect. So right now, your best bet is yourself, your instinct and your knowledge. Cross-check and analyze what you see. Go to trusted news sources and do not share dubious videos or pictures. Now let's turn our attention to Haiti. The Caribbean island nation is in turmoil. Gang violence has erupted across the country and the capital, Port-au-Prince, is under siege. Amid this chaos, Haiti will soon be leaderless. Prime Minister Ariel Henry has agreed to resign. That was a key demand of Haitian gangs. Henri was unelected, so the gang said he was not fit to lead. And they used Henri to justify their rampage. But now that he has stepped down, what next? A power tussle, a struggle for control. And leading the charge is one man, Jimmy Cheridzia, better known as Barbecue. Who is this man? And why is he so powerful? Here's our report.
If Ariel Henry doesn't step down, the country will suffer a genocide. If Ariel Henry doesn't step down, if the international community continues to support Ariel Henry, they will lead us directly into a civil war that will end in genocide.
That's Jimmy Cherizier, better known as Barbecue. Barbecue sounded the bell, and Prime Minister Ariel Henry's goose was cooked.
After the Council of Ministers tonight accepted to put into place a transitional presidential council, the members of the council will be picked after agreement with different sectors of the national life. The government I am running will remove itself immediately after the establishment of the said council.
Barbecue set fire to Haiti, and the Prime Minister has been forced to step down. But who is Barbecue, and how did he get so powerful? Powerful enough to cook up a civil war? Well, Barbecue is no ordinary fire starter. He was once on the other side of the divide. He was once a police officer, but he was fired in 2018 over his alleged involvement in extrajudicial killings. There was the Grande Ravine massacre in 2017, where more than 9 people were killed by the Haitian police. Then, in November 2018, another massacre took place, the La Saline massacre. 71 people were killed. 400 houses were burned down. Barbecue was apparently involved in both incidents. And a month after La Saline, he was kicked out of the force. Barbecue even faced US sanctions over the bloodbath, but that did nothing to stop his rise. After getting fired, Barbecue joined Haiti's gangs. He currently leads a coalition of gangs in Haiti called the G9 Family and Allies. This group has been wreaking havoc for years without any punishment. Initially, it was because Barbecue had support from the top. Barbecue was allegedly working for Haiti's former president, Jovenel Moïse. He became the president's unofficial enforcer, enforcing order in the streets of Port-au-Prince and rounding up people to vote for his patron. But then, Moïse was assassinated in 2021. In his place came Ariel Henry. Henry became Prime Minister and acting President. He was put there by an international coalition to bring back order to Haiti, but he could not manage that alone. 2 weeks ago, Henry went to Kenya. This was to sign a deal that would have allowed the Kenyan police to lead an international force in Haiti. This force could have finally countered Barbecue and his boys. So it had to be stopped. When Henry left, Barbecue began his coup, and everything seems to have gone according to plan. So what's next for Barbecue?
We demand that the choice of the person who is going to lead this country we live in will be made by the Haitian people. We want to make sure the person who is going to lead this country's wife and children live in Haiti. We want to make sure the people who are going to be ministers in this government, their wives and their children live in the country.
Basically, Barbecue wants to rule, either directly or by holding the families of the next leaders hostage. Will he succeed, or will the next plan be a washout? We'll soon find out.
Our next story is about a place where it is always night and it is always snowing. I'm talking about the deep sea. It's a wondrous underworld. It exists beneath the surface at a depth of about 660 feet. Sunlight doesn't reach this realm, so the deeper you go, the colder and darker it gets. Plus, when you're under the sea, water pushes you down. It pushes down on you, rather, and this builds pressure. Again, the deeper you go, the greater the pressure. So it is a difficult place to be in, at least for land dwellers. Though you may relate to deep sea creatures if you hate your job, if you've had to adapt to crushing pressure and oppressive darkness at the workplace. But jokes apart, the deep sea is intimidating. So humans have long treated it as separate from our world. like a shadowy basement without oxygen, populated by alien creatures, when in fact the deep sea is crucial. It makes up more than 95% of the Earth's habitable space. That's right, 95%. It has an astonishing diversity of ecosystems, animals, plants, and resources beyond imagination, which also makes it one of the most important things to understand. So lately, humans have been trying a little harder. Recently, marine researchers went on a deep-sea mission. They focused on the Bounty Trough. It's off the coast of New Zealand, about 800 kilometers long and not very well explored, so it was the perfect target. And we don't say this lightly, because the researchers have found 100 new marine species: fish, coral, mollusk, squid, you name it. And this little thing, no one knows what to call it yet. It can be a sea star or a type of coral. It may not seem all that important, maybe because it looks like the leftover lunch that you forgot to take out of your school bag, but it proves yet again how little we know about the deep sea. You know that the Earth is mainly a water world. 70% of its surface is covered with oceans, but more than 80% remains unexplored. In fact, we know more about the surface of Mars and the Moon than the ocean floor of our planet. Until the 19th century, we thought the deep sea was devoid of life. But then we sped up exploration. We made new discoveries, like the marine snow, the snow that I was talking about earlier. These are pale flecks made of dead fish, plants, even excreta. I know, not the kind of snow that you were expecting, but the creatures down there love it. For some species, it is their favorite food. If they could, they'd probably make snow cones out of it. But apart from snow that looks like dandruff, humans found so many species: forests of ancient corals, undersea urchins with cactus-like spikes, and fish that lights up. Sometimes the light is a lure, other times it is a weapon. But huge gaps remain in our knowledge. So far, scientists have discovered 240,000 species. They claim more than 2 million exist. But here's what humans care about more: precious metals and minerals like manganese, copper, nickel, cobalt. They can be used to make mobile phones or batteries for electric vehicles. So countries want to mine the seabed and extract minerals from it. The process is called deep sea mining. Countries like China, Norway, and Russia are pushing for it. Scientists say this is severely harmful. It's exploitation of the seabed. But this is not the only kind. The deep sea has become a convenient garbage dump too, for waste that is too dangerous, like radioactive materials, or waste that is too expensive to store on land, like artificial fibers or plastics. So we barely understand the deep sea, but we are already abusing it and exploiting it. We say it's not a good look for humans. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thailand celebrates National Elephant Day with a feast for the giant animals. In Virginia, staff at a wildlife center dress as foxes as they take care of an orphaned fox cub. And a gust of wind took Pope Francis's papal hat flying away during his weekly audience. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1781, the planet Uranus was discovered. It was spotted by an English astronomer, William Herschel. He was surveying stars when he spotted this planet, and he later found that it orbited the sun. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. News.